right, outstanding. Let me turn the volume down on my phone before that's a thing. Welcome to the work session for October 4th. Councilor Beatty is excused from the work session and Councilor Nicodemus will be late. First item up is the tree board. It's the annual update, and it'll be presented by Peter Pasquarelli, our Public Works Director. Anybody from the tree board coming?
Not this evening. Maybe somebody might show up on Zoom, but I don't think so. But thank you, Mayor Gamba and council members. I'm Peter Pasquarelli, the Public Works Director, and also the tree board liaison. This past year, since last October has been really busy. Tree board's been involved in quite a lot of things and accomplished quite a lot over the last year. As a reminder, I wanted to see here. How do I get this to move, Scott? Sorry. Oh, I got it.
I do have an idea for somebody, so
Okay.
I'll try and remember to.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, as a reminder, our tree board members, our chairs, Kathleen Brennan Hunter, Gina Dake is our vice chair, Lee Garnett is our secretary, John Brown, one of our residents in the community and an arborist, and Christina Harris and Alexis Martin. I wanted to mention Madison Tucker. Madison was a member and she resigned back in May. I really want to commend our tree board, the volunteers that serve on there. They did a lot of work over the last year, spent a lot of extra time over the past 2 years, reviewing and tree code, providing feedback and advice on how we formulate our new private tree code, as well as the public tree code that we worked on previous to that.
Peter, can you hold just a second? Why are we getting the echo?
Echo? The PA in here, so I'll ask.
Okay. It's just hard because your voice is actually quieter but just barely enough quieter than it's.
It sounds weird up here.
It's very hard to hear.
I can hear the echo.
Okay, go ahead. Let's do it.
So they did a fantastic job, and we have really a great tree board. We do have a vacancy, and we're certainly looking to fill that. I think we got a new application in just this past week to get that filled. Hopefully, we'll have a couple more applications coming in over the next several weeks and months. So what was going on over the 21 and 22 over the last year? I like to keep this Oregon Tree City of the Year. That was a 2021 designation, something that I think we're proud of and reflects the great work that our community does towards our urban forest work. But also, we were designated a Tree City USA for 2020. That should be 2021, our sixth year in a row. And also received our 3rd year in a row of our Tree City USA Growth Award. That is an award that reflects the additional work that we're doing on our urban forest. We did work on our private tree code that was adopted in April of this past year of 2022, and that became effective May 2022. We've also been working on the tree permitting system. We've gotten feedback from the tree board on that. Natalie has worked with them to help, streamline the documentation that we're putting together for that online permitting system. Currently, we're still got a little bit more work to do as relates to taking the payments on that new permitting system with GovBuild. A little bit on the highlights for Tree City USA. So we send in our application for Tree City USA every December. So December 21 was our last application that we sent in. So in 2021, the application that was submitted reflected that we were spending about $26 per capita. A lot of that is reflective of the work that we were doing on our tree code. It captures a lot of the work that our engineering department is doing related to reinvesting in trees along our safe projects and integrated infrastructure projects that they're doing. So they're making sure that if we are removing trees, we're also planting trees. So there's that expenses are captured in there. And then also our tree planting that we're doing as a community, working with Friends of Trees, doing some of the tree planting that our Public Works Department does. It captures the tree maintenance work that we do in the management of our system. Part of that management captures the education and outreach pieces that we've worked on to inform the community of our changes in our tree code over the last year, as well as some of the permitting costs that we've captured. So an increase there. And we've also seen an increase in our volunteer hours too, and working with Friends of Trees in those different events that we've had. So, as a total, in terms of our community forest expenditures in 2021, it was around $562,000 a year. So, that's man hours, project-related expenses on our safe projects related to trees, our outreach, our work that we did with the code. And there's also a portion of that reflects those volunteer hours. It captures the volunteer hours. There's a payment there as well. Last year, we planted about 1,362 trees. Part of that is planting that the city did. Part of it's with our partners that we work with North Clackamas Watershed Council and Johnson Creek Watershed Council. We do provide them dollars for some of our watershed programs, and what they do is that they plant trees along the riparian corridors in the community. So we count those as part of our tree planting as well in the community, as well as private development and the trees that we plant during Arbor Day and our Friends of Trees events. The Tree City Growth Award. So as I mentioned earlier, this recognizes those higher levels of tree care in our community. I wanted to highlight what we submitted as part of our application, some of the things that we had done over the last year in 2021 that were part of that application. So we did do a pilot tree inventory where we did a sample in many of the different neighborhoods, about 2,000 right-of-way trees that we were captured as part of that inventory. We had a higher level of tree planting projects related to our safe and SSMP projects, our Friends of Trees. We also demonstrated a higher planting to removal ratio. So we're planting more trees than are being removed based off of the documentation that we have. As we move forward over the next several years, with our tree permitting system, we'll even have a better sense and documentation there. So this is focused on those public trees, not necessarily the private trees as part of this. But we'll see that as we move forward and how that impacts the private trees. Tree protection, outreach and engagement, and the external recognition that we got in 2021. So those all were submitted, and we were recognized for those things as part of our Tree City USA application. Ongoing projects that we've been working on this calendar year. Certainly spending a lot of time on outreach with our private tree code. Both internally as staff, but our tree board also is a valuable tool and participates in that outreach information as well. We do have tree planting. We have our Arbor Day event coming up. We'll have another Friends of Tree event this October 22nd. We'll be submitting our Tree City USA application again in December. We have our leaf drop coming up the first two weekends, or first and third weekend of November, and then the first, second, and third weekends of December. We'll be doing leaf drop at Public Works. And we've also been doing a lot of work on updating our website as well. And then Arbor Day, oops, wanted to go back a little bit. Our Arbor Day event is this Saturday, October 22nd. It's from 9 to 3 p.m., a little bit longer event, but we've got several other things going on that day that we want to do. We'll start off with we'll have our Friends of Trees event at 9 a.m. They'll go out and do the planting and throughout the community. We've also are partnering with PGE. They'll be available to do an electric tool exchange again. And then we'll do at 1 o'clock, we're gonna do our ceremonial tree planting, a silver oak. And we're gonna actually be, holding this event here at the parking lot out in front of City Hall and planting a tree here on the park that surrounds City Hall here.
Where does the Friends of Trees kick off?
It will kick off
Also here?
also here at
Okay.
9 a.m. Yeah. So we've got the tree planting, some tree giveaways, apple cider donuts, and our Ask an Arborist booth that we'll have. Any other items on that, Natalie, that I missed?
I'm working on some crafts and pumpkin painting. I'm a little hesitant at the weather forecast to make sure those pumpkins dry, but we'll work on it. I'll do my rain dance.
But this will be I think the fourth Friends of Trees event that we've done in the city. So they've been great to work with.
So are they going to be planting right-of-way trees or?
Up both right away and trees, private trees.
Cool.
All right. And then, here's what's upcoming in 2022 and into 2023. And, next October when we meet again to talk about the annual update for the tree board, hopefully we'll made some progress on some of these other items as well. We're going to continue to work on our engagement with the community with private tree code. We're continuing to tweak the information that we have to make things more easily understandable. Working on the tree permitting process and making sure people, have an understanding of the information requirements that they need to go through that process, as well as making the updates on that system and integrating in the payment processing as part of that permitting piece. Right now, we do have an online fillable PDF that's worked well, but we want to have this integrated permitting system and payment system together. I think one of the other things coming up is this climate equitable communities. Our planning department's been talking about that to some extent over the last couple months. There is a component there that relates to commercial tree code that we're starting to dig into, some requirements there that will apply as part of that climate equitable communities piece. We'll be working on that over the next 9 months.
Peter, when does that apply? I thought, my recollection was the commercial code applied a little later, but there's a lot in the, as you know, the CFEC is meeting.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Natalie Rogers, Climate and Natural Resources Manager. So I had some conversations, just initial kind of discussions with our planning team. It sounds like on the parking lot requirements, there are some references to options that developers could take to satisfy certain requirements for their parking lot standards, one of which being I think they talk about connected canopies or continuous canopy requirement. As you know, our new private tree code, the way that it's written only applies to residentially zoned properties. So we don't have any clear and objective standards that are explicit for commercial properties. So we just need to make sure that we have some language within our tree code that commercial developers could follow if they choose to take that pathway for the parking lot standards for kind of that continuous canopy requirement.
And is that,
I believe it's due by June 2023, end of June, but I haven't had follow-up conversations with planning, and I don't know if
sure.
they want to stagger that at all.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course.
And then, we're working with the engineering department to update public works standards as necessary for our trees in urban forest. One of the things that we seem to always talk about is developing a heritage tree program for the community. So that's something that's come up in conversations with Tree Board over the last several years. They would like to spend some time working on that, and I think we've heard feedback from council from time to time about from heritage tree programs, or questions about it at least.
Yeah, I always sort of thought of it as a stepping stone to tree code. Now that I have tree code, I'm good. Right? if you want to do a heritage program, I think it's cool to celebrate amazing big trees.
Yeah.
But as far as prioritizing time and
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, I'm not clear on how much work it would take to create a program and sort of feel the same. It's cool, but
Yeah.
lots of things are cool and some of them get us more results.
It is one of the things that the tree board has talked about and would like to see. So we'll see what they put together and see if we can have something that's simple to apply, to draft and apply, right? And then we're planning on having another Friends of Tree event in the spring. In April, and then our October 2023, maybe November 23 Arbor Day event. We try to do we've switched Arbor Day to the fall because fall tends to be a better time of the year to plant trees here in the Pacific Northwest.
I have a question about this year's Arbor Day. Are we doing a giveaway of trees from the city as well as Friends of Trees?
Yeah, so we'll be having some smaller trees as a giveaway, and that's going to be available at the Arbor Day event starting at 1 p.m. The ones that's like the city celebrations, we'll have some good sized, but they are going to be smaller than the Friends of Trees trees, but they will be large enough for you to plant in your yard. And then the trees for Friends of Trees, you do need to pre-register. It sounds like the street tree portion is full for Friends of Trees now. They're actually, what they do is they collect names throughout the year. And so we actually start to stack up a wait list throughout the year because it's a really kind of a high demand program. And so the street trees take a little bit more work on Friends of Trees ends because they want to make sure that they're citing them correctly. They actually need to check with the city on our standards, and actually they coordinate with our urban forester, Courtney, to go out and actually make sure that these are appropriate for the location. They also have stricter requirements for ordering them because we have a street tree list. While the private trees, we don't necessarily have a requirement because you have a larger yard, there's less conflict with utilities and such. And so they have more freedom to be essentially what stock is available at nurseries in order to order those trees. So the wait list for the street trees filled up very quickly. And then now I talked to our Friends of Trees partners, and there are potentially a few spots more for yard trees. Folks should call them directly. And by October 8th is kind of when I heard that the cutoff is probably going to be, just because they're ordering trees on the 9th, but definitely call Friends of Trees directly if you would like to get a yard tree, and they'll try to work with you. If anything, we have more Friends of Trees events coming up, and you just get to go back on that wait list. But you don't have to wait too long.
Do you know, sorry, just one follow-up question. This was a question I received online. So
Yeah.
I was wondering what species of trees the city will be giving away and if they are more climate adapted species or things we think will be more climate adapted.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. You know, we have a variety of different species that we've been kind of growing in our nursery. Some of them are going to be kind of those frequent flyers that we saw from last Arbor Days. So those are things like sugar pines, sequoias, a lot of conifers that are drought tolerant in our area. We tried to order some dogwoods and other species like that that are maybe a little bit more popular, but those also necessarily aren't the most climate adapted and drought tolerant, and they can kind of be a little bit more sensitive at those smaller sizes. So what I will make sure to do is, since I don't have a list with me right now, I'll see if I can get that information to Jordan and maybe we can share it over social media ahead of the event.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, of course.
So why a Friends of Tree event in April rather than, say, February or something?
Just getting it scheduled,
They're just that busy.
They're busy, yeah.
Oh, they're very busy. And then we also upcoming, which you'll be seeing us again pretty shortly because we need to renew kind of a larger contract. If we want to keep doing those events, we need to make sure to have time to kind of get that contract executed. And when we're looking at the April Friends of Trees event as well, one thing that we're going to be discussing is kind of what type of maintenance programs and events can we be doing around maybe pruning or other type volunteer-based events that also folks can take advantage of, particularly for right-of-way trees, to see if maybe folks can get some assistance on pruning for those ones.
Well, assistance and pruning classes would be
Right.
cool. I took one years ago from, the Orchardist, the
Home Orchard Society?
Orchard Society, yeah. And it was awesome. I learned a ton, and so I've been able to prune all my trees since then.
Yeah.
And it's, it's a solid day if you do it right.
Mm-hmm.
Come away having a pretty good idea.
Right, yeah, and that's, I think, something that Friends of Trees has expressed interest in, and we've expressed interest, and it also aligns with some of our other goals around kind of stewardship, so.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. Very good.
And that's really all I had. So
That's a lot.
any other questions or comments or?
Well, and he's not going anywhere, so if one occurs to you in 10 minutes. All right, cool, thank you very much. That was good. Yeah, I look forward to seeing what we do with commercial property tree code. I think that's obviously the next big lift, and there's so much opportunity out there. You look at some of those campuses in the industrial area, and there's just huge lawns.
Well, and yeah, and I think I would say, there's those requirements of that climate equitable communities piece, and I think we're gonna try to use that process
Right.
to do some, but it might not be the final bit of commercial tree code. I mean, that might be more of a heavy lift and a little bit further down the road, but
Yeah.
as we work with the planning and sort of develop that. I know they have a lot on their plate with the TSP too coming up, so.
Yeah, it seemed like mostly when I looked at the CFAC commercial code, I went, oh, good, this gives us
Yes.
a good head start on a lot of the conversations that we need to have. So I really appreciated it.
I actually have a question. Have we thought about also partnering along with what we're already doing with Friends of Trees, but working with them to do some a planting event for our watershed, to preserve the watershed? 'Cause I know that's something that the North Clackamas Watershed Council is concerned about. And I think working with Friends of Trees and making that a project along with the other plantings that are lined up would be beneficial. I mean, tremendously.
Yeah, so some of the watershed councils, so North Clackamas Watershed Council, I think Peter mentioned, has Streamside Stewards. So that program is a restoration-focused program. So they do tree plantings, but also underplantings, primarily on riparian properties, so properties right next to the waterways. So any type of thing where it actually includes trees getting planted, we as a city benefit from it just even through our stormwater permits. So we had report that information out to the state on kind of watershed health through our kind of non-point pollutant type reduction efforts. Partnering with more organizations, though, on doing kind of plantings on public properties, particularly looking at, what the future of parks are in Milwaukie and such. There might be
Right.
more opportunities and restoration opportunities. The problem I think for us mostly is just like staff to facilitate those. So we try to find other partner organizations who can kind of help us on some of that work. Friends of Trees is one. Another group that I've been involved with recently at the city is our Connecting Canopies work group. They're Urban Green Spaces Institute, Blueprint Foundation. And they kind of focus on kind of getting those community-based organizations who are aligned on trees together, Portland Fruit Tree Project. And so I'm hoping that there will be some cool opportunities coming from those partnerships as well to leverage them in the community. We look for pretty much any opportunity to get some trees in the ground. And right now, we have some public properties that we're working on. But I think, one thing that I presented back when we were looking at private tree code is, almost 80% of our urban forest is on private land. And so really finding partners who can help engage private property owners on restoration opportunities is going to be critical for us to kind of achieve those canopy goals.
And we actually have reached out to the North Clackamas Watershed Council and Johnson Creek Watershed Council and the Audubon Backyard Habitat Group to see if they were interested in doing a larger Friends of Tree event. And, the feedback that we got back from them is, they like the idea, but it's sort of beyond their scope and capabilities to do that.
So we have a budget line item, and I'm forgetting how much it is that we put towards the watershed councils to do that restoration work, particularly North Clackamas, because they do that.
Yeah, I mean, the Johnson Creek Watershed Council, the North Clackamas Watershed Council, and the Backyard for Habitat, I think it's about $7,500 a year each. Maybe it's $10,000 each a year.
I think it was more like 10.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's in that $7,500 to $10,000 per each of those.
And we get annual reports from those groups, and I'd be happy to share those with you guys so you can see what maybe what they did in the last year. And then we're always exploring opportunities to open that up. That's kind of one of those projects that would be really cool to expand one day.
And like they weren't doing streamside steward work much in the city of Milwaukie before that, because that's how it gets paid for. So Wes was their big donor before, so it was like upstream of Milwaukie was getting a lot of love, and Milwaukie wasn't getting a lot of love. So now we are doing that, but it might be something we could increase to get more of that done.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. I think
All right, so our next item is the Park and Recreation Board annual update, which will be presented by Natalie Rogers, our Climate and Natural Resources.
Do you know how to get here?
I think so. I think I'm just right here, right?
You gotta stop sharing. Is anybody joining you?
I do not believe so, unless somebody popped up on Zoom.
Who's the current chair?
Oh, Ben Johnson is the chair of PARB.
This one is right.
Yes. Great. Well, hello again. So I'm the staff liaison to our Parks and Recreation Board, and I'm excited to present to you guys kind of some of the vast amount of work that they've been doing this year. So first, I just wanted to mention that we have a full PARB, which at the very beginning of the year, we had quite a few seats to fill, and now I'm happy to say that we have a full team. I want to say thank you to our members who left PARB this year, Martha Germany, our youth member, Jackson Calhoun. We do have another youth position open at PARB. It's a really fun board to be involved with, especially now with a bunch of activities happening around parks. But it's a great group of folks, and we have some fun conversations, and I think that we have a good representation of all of our community. So thank you to everyone. Ben Johnson's our chair, Ali Fierstein is our vice chair, and then we have Heather, Virginia, Martine, Sabina, Gary, and of course Desi is our council rep.
Martha's been on for a long time, too.
Martha was on PARB for a long time, yes, yeah. And she lives right next to Fernburg. And so she was really passionate about Fernburg, and that's one thing that we're hoping to kind of continue the passion with next year. So in 2022, there was a lot that PARB did. First off, we spent a lot of time getting back up to the full team. We had some great folks apply, and I wish that we can just have everyone expanded and keep having PARB members. Luckily, these are public meetings, so I still encourage everyone to join and participate in the conversation. We also, in 2022, had our Earth Day restoration event. So PARB has taken on Earth Day, and so with me moving into being the staff liaison to PARB, I really, PARB and I worked together to kind of merge some of our natural resources events, and Pennywood Detention Pond, or that's also the Willow Place Natural Area. We did a large ivy pull there, and we removed over 2,500 pounds of ivy from that Earth Day restoration event. And we're hoping.
That number again?
2,500 pounds.
2,500. I heard 125 pounds, and I went, no.
You're like, that doesn't sound like a.
I saw the pile.
Yes, yeah, 2,500 pounds of ivy. And so it was really effective. We got a lot of plants in the ground as well. Surprisingly, people enjoyed pulling ivy more than planting. So I think moving forward, which, I mean, I've pulled lots of ivy in my day, so I always find that very surprising. So I think moving forward, we're going to look at a lot more invasive removals. We did hear a lot of great feedback. A lot of folks from the community joined, neighbors, and they were like, oh, when's the next one? And so there's a lot of excitement around it. So I look forward to being able to coordinate with staff to offer more volunteer opportunities like that. PARB has really taken a big role in the parks development work. Adam Moore, our parks development coordinator, and I'll mention it a little bit more later, but you know, he's been almost like a second staff liaison to PARB. He's been fantastic and involving PARB in pretty much everything going on in our development projects, and really giving them an opportunity to advise on staff and these projects moving forward. And then, you know, at the very beginning of the year, before things started moving very rapidly when it comes to parks development, PARB really had a long conversation around goals. And I think part of that was just trying to really figure out what's PARB's role in the community? What do we want to focus on? Where do they really want to have action? And I'll show you a slide a little bit later that has kind of some of the sticky notes for goals, but there was quite a few goals that we came up with, and we consolidated them to got down to 6, and that was a challenge. But as you can see, some of these are more rolling goals that we'll be able to kind of work on in the following years to come as well. A big one was around engagement and equitable engagement, and starting to really look at tracking that when it comes to activity in our parks. Another one was really around also how does PARB advertise itself and make sure the community is aware of the advisory board and the ability to kind of come and engage with the city on parks. We have our bylaws, which we're going to be working on. I'm hoping to be able to wrap it up by the end of this year. It might kind of move into springtime next year. We originally started actually this last spring, but since we didn't have a full PARB members really felt that it was important for us to be kind of fully up as a team, and that way everyone can really be engaged in the bylaw conversation, which is pretty important. Along being great goal makers, they also knew that a big thing is how to define and track goals. So we're going to focus a little bit on that and tracking for minutes and just kind of making sure that we have a really concrete way to communicate kind of how we're working towards our goals in the future and present. There was a really good suggestion to have a goal around sustainability, around food forests and edible landscaping. Some of the work we did for that, we actually had a permaculture class at our Earth Day event. We're kind of incorporating some of that into the parks development conversations around trees and particularly fruit trees. That's also one thing that I know PARB and Tree Board, for example, can coordinate on, is kind of shared learning on what is a community orchard, what are the opportunities, challenges, et cetera. And that's a really great place for kind of to have that community advisory body, because it will help us, especially knowing what potentially resources it takes to take care of something like that. Is that something the community finds valuable? And then advocacy, they actually had a really good goal around advocating for a destination playground for universal ability play. And so part of that was achieved recently. Part of Adam's work with our consultants was actually having this parks design presentation, which was held and it's recorded and folks can see that on our city YouTube channel. But just learning about what is universal play and starting the conversation on, if not for these development projects, is this something that we should be advocating for elsewhere in the city? So PARB had a lot of really great goals. I think that we're going to be continue to work on some of them in 2023. But it was just a great conversation around kind of what does PARB feel its role is in the community right now. So parks development engagement. So as I mentioned, Adam has done a fantastic job in enrolling PARB into this process, and they've played a really critical role in some of the work that we've been doing as a city. First off, PARB is kind of the venue for the community to hear updates on how these projects are being developed. Our PARB meetings happen at the fourth Wednesday at 4:30, and at 5:30, that's when people can tune in to get a parks development update every PARB meeting. It's kind of a standing time hold for Adam to give that update to PARB, boards liaisons from library board, from any other board who kind of wants to be involved in this process. And they're recorded and also available on our city YouTube channel. So if folks want to tune in to see kind of what the month update was for September, they can tune in and actually see how that went. Adam brings a lot of these plans, engagement plans, designs to PARB to look at to solicit PARB's feedback as a group. PARB members participate in all of our events as community members as well, and that's really where they can share their individual opinions. But they also provide their kind of joint decisions and advice and feedback as an entity at these PARB meetings. Parks engagement, event volunteering, and advocacy. So a big role that PARB plays is actually getting folks to attend these events and actually coming out and volunteering themselves. I want to call out Virginia Pye. She's one of our PARB members. She's also on our Milwaukie Parks Foundation, and she is a stellar volunteer. I think she always volunteers at these events. And a few other PARB members themselves show up all the time and with their family and friends, and they encourage folks to show up, and that's equally important. And so PARB really plays a good role in getting the community aware and involved in some of the work that the city's doing. And then, as I mentioned, there was a really great playground presentation where, PARB was invited to attend, and it was kind of a alignment with PARB's goals, and it really kind of initiated a good conversation. I know I tuned in and probably asked some really tricky questions to Ben Johnson, who is our PARB chair, who actually presented from his own professional capacity at this presentation on materials and, what type of materials make for a good playground and what are some of the considerations. So I even made my husband tune in, and he, has probably not looked at a playground in 10 years and thought, why did they choose that material? But he was kind of sitting there going, I never thought of that around some of these decisions. So it's really a fascinating conversation. I encourage folks to kind of watch that recording on. And so looking to 2023, so you can see that white blurb at the bottom. Don't worry about reading the text, obviously, it's very small, but you can see there was a lot of thought that went into choosing goals, and we had a lot of sub goals and a lot of goals can we fold into goals. So each of those sticky notes is what it was, is a unique goal that PARB members actually brought to the table and they were voting on. And so I think a big project we might have on our hands at the beginning is really establishing what goals do we want to move over, but then setting these goals for 2023. And we're hoping to have that conversation pretty soon. Of course, we want to make sure to be considerate of the holidays, and since our PARB meetings are at the end of the month and we have some pretty important decisions coming up about our parks development and other kind of parks items, we know that agendas might be full. And so some of these conversations might get pushed to early 2023. But PARB is going to continue to be engaged in this process. No matter what park is being developed or who's developing it, PARB definitely plays a really strong role in kind of bringing that community voice. We're also potentially looking at in-person meetings. So we've been meeting virtually, and one thing PARB really liked to do was to actually get out in the parks together and actually tour some of them and kind of do a walkthrough and have a conversation, particularly existing parks, you know, ones that are our small neighborhood parks, Homewood Park, Spring Park, ones that are not maybe being developed but are equally as important to the community. And so they definitely wanted to coordinate, and we've been having conversations about that on at least maybe once a season, getting out and checking out some of these parks in person together. So definitely stay tuned if you would like to join us on those kind of group outings. Another thing that, you know, is an interesting role for PARB to be in is looking at what is their role as community members who are advising to the city in a time of change potentially with parks at the city. And so I think that they're kind of, as they hear more information as community members, they'll be able to have conversations together about how they want to serve in that capacity. City staff will kind of make sure to bring them information so that way they're doing it responsibly, and making sure that we don't have any kind of considerations or on ethics that we want to be mindful of. But as citizens or community members themselves here in Milwaukie, you know, I think that they're going to really bring a unique perspective to it. And you know, they are maybe a little bit more knowledgeable of things going on with parks in Milwaukie, and we're making sure to bring them information at our PARB meetings. So they are, you know, the city's transparent. NCPRD, Heather Cook from NCPRD comes to all of our PARB meetings, and she always gives an update on what work NCPRD has been doing, all of the recreation programming, all the fantastic stuff that her team does. And so we just make sure that we're really transparent and we give them all the information so that way they can be having these conversations with their family, friends, neighbors. And then, like I said, you know, our goals discussions, there might be new things that pop up. And part of that comes from, we have some relatively new PARB members still who are maybe finding their voices and wanting to really kind of understand parks a little bit better and PARB's role before they kind of bring some advice coming forward on what we want to focus on. So I think there's a lot on the horizon for PARB, and it's a really exciting time to be a part of PARB. It's funny because I know some PARB members, you know, they've been involved in PARB for years, and they've been nudging maybe one project forward for quite a while, and all of a sudden there's 4 or 5 parks being developed in plans, and it's all like a wave of excitement. And so I know that they're pretty happy to be on the team right now. And I always encourage folks, even if you're just wanting to pop in for one meeting, they're really fun. And if you are curious about anything to do with parks, stop by PARB, at least, you know, see some faces so that you can be familiar, and maybe you can catch them at the next event and ask them some questions. And with that, I just want to invite everyone to our monthly PARB meetings happening at 4:30 on the 4th Wednesdays. Make sure to check the events calendars just because things are getting a little bit shifted to be conscious of upcoming winter holidays. And, you know, we always are accepting applications to our onboard system for future PARB openings. I also like to throw in here, if folks have concerns with parks in Milwaukie, you're welcome to come to PARB. There's always a public comment period at the beginning of PARB to hear from members of the community. I also like to drop in NCPRD's facility request link just in case folks want to submit a facilities request, and that's the process to do it right now. And then reach out to me if there's any questions about PARB or parks, and I can direct you to the right person. And yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Great presentation, as always. Any questions?
Nailed it.
Pretty much. All right. And our last item for the work session is Parks Operation and Maintenance discussion. This will be presented by Peter Passarelli again. It's the Peter and Natalie show.
This afternoon it is. Thanks, Scott. Well, good afternoon again. I'm Peter Passarelli, the Public Works Director, and I'm here this afternoon to provide a brief discussion and field questions about our potential parks operations and maintenance. As we're reviewing options for our potential, for potentially managing parks within the city. You know, I will mention one of the things that we did do, and I think I provided it in the staff report. So, you know, what I'm going to be talking about tonight reflects the city's operations and maintenance of parks, not really considering providing recreation services and adult services. You know, that's something that we're still sort of working on and conducting an analysis on, working with a consultant to do that. So this is really sort of a reflection of what it would look like for the city to manage the parks that it owns without necessarily providing those recreation services, contemplating that perhaps we have a partnership with NCPRD to provide those, to continue to provide those services, and to manage the North Clackamas Park. I just wanted to point that out. So what I've got for you is, let me see if I can find the cursor again.
It's on TV, you guys. Keep going. Nope. We can do that, yeah.
There we go. Thanks. So I put together a budget forecast, you know, using the available data that we had, our projected revenue streams and expense streams based off of a structure, and forecasted it out for 6 years. You know, I will mention year one was contemplating July 1, 23, so that those property tax revenues are reflective of what we were forecasting for 2023. So, you know, moving it out, if it was a 2024 piece, it would sort of fall into year two in terms of those property tax revenues. But looking at the projected revenues, you know, we were looking at just starting at just under about 1.5 million in that first year, generally moving up to, you know, close to 1.7 million, looking at property taxes, a transfer from the general fund to cover some of the current existing expenses that we have as they relate to parks and our parks planning work that we're doing and development work that we're doing on our 3 parks. It does contemplate some small user fees and program fees, but just sort of really minor in nature, pretty negligent. And then some growing event revenue, perhaps for renting out park spaces and things like that for some of the smaller neighborhood parks.
What was the intergovernmental?
You know, that would be revenue from the Marine Board, any other there may be some other small grants that might come across. The Marine Board, I think, provides some revenue for the dock removal on an annual basis. So that's part of that. And then perhaps some interest income as well. So, you know, that sort of formulates the operating expenses or revenues for those first 6 years. And then I forecasted out the expenses based on certain assumptions that we made in terms of what we would need for personnel to manage those parks and to do the operations and maintenance. And, you know, looking at the budget forecast, you know, we do, it seems from this analysis that there's sufficient resources available to provide those services as we start off, to cover our expenses for those first 5 years. I would reflect, you know, there is a declining operating income as you go out into those further years, as you track that based off of the expenses, the revenues coming in and the expenses. Our expenses will grow, inflationary costs. And they grow at a quicker rate than we would keep up with the changes in our property tax revenue forecasts. So it does decline. You can see the operating income in year 6, based off of this analysis, is negative, but there's still sort of cash. There's still a cash balance in place.
So is this assuming, Peter, those transfers from the general fund, are those specific to ongoing projects that we already have outlined, or are you assuming a certain amount of general fund transfer in order to continue basic operations?
That contemplates current sort of personnel expenses that we're using for our parks work that we're doing right now, plus some minor expenses, but it's generally the personnel expenses. So right now, you know, we're right around $134,000 a year in terms of personnel expenses that the general fund is paying for our parks development work that we're doing.
Okay.
So this sort of contemplates that sort of stays in place.
Okay.
And does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. Thanks.
A little bit more breakdown on the expenses. I can show you here. Let me see. So just sort of the general personnel piece that we've looked at, it really sort of contemplates 5 full-time staff. You know, our current parks development coordinator remaining on staff. Two sort of parks technicians, maintenance technicians at a level 2, sort of that journeyman level parks technician. A lead technician to provide that sort of foreman supervision type work. An administrative specialist to work on, you know, the administrative components of managing parks, to start to work with some of the small programming pieces that even on some of the neighborhood parks that we would still have to keep up with. Separate from that larger recreational programming and adult services piece. And then it contemplates some seasonal staff as well.
And does the budget forecast assume anything about the park's goal continuing and incorporate as such the revenue that we typically use to support our parks goals, or our city council goals, sorry?
Well, and I think that's part of that general fund piece. I mean, is just going, let me go back a slide here.
See Anne reaching for the microphone.
I love listening to him give the answer first.
I think this transfer from general fund sort of contemplates that we're still, that's part of those dollars that we would allocate towards that goal. You know, I think we've been doing that over the past year on our parks development piece.
Yeah, so that was actually outside of the parks goal. We had done that because we were doing a number of projects that are actually construction related. If the council decides to proceed, we have 3, but we also have a 4th, if not a 5th park that we would be constructing, because we would have Milwaukie Bay possibly, and we would have Dogwood Park, which are currently not considered as a part of this contribution.
What was the other one after Milwaukie Bay?
Dogwood.
Okay.
And so we would have urban renewal funding that would also, so it may not, I'm more saying this so you know it's not always going to be general fund. It may be urban renewal funding, it may be other sources, but I do believe that this position fits with the work generally that we would be doing, and it would be an ongoing expense from the city.
Okay. That's really what I was trying to get at, is how much of this is really a general fund expense that we are asking the city budget to commit to, and how much of it is reflecting work that may get funded through other pathways. So thanks.
Thank you.
And I will say, just on this forecast document here too, so I mean, this is operations and maintenance. It doesn't reflect any capital expenditures. You know, we'll have a later discussion about those as well. So yeah, so I talked a little bit about those personnel pieces, and then, you know, moving on to the material services and contractual support. So my indentations, my things got a little mixed up there. You know, I think what we did, what I've done, you know, working and talking with Ann, we've sort of outlined those basic expenses that we're going to need in terms of material services to provide and manage those parks initially. And it includes, you know, the general professional services type things that pop up from time to time, working with consultants to help us solve problems that might be outside of our skill sets. There's some money focused for that, some training and education for employees, general supplies that are that might be needed, tools and equipment for those employees as well. The utility expense, water, electric expenses, and then a maintenance and repair account of about $120,000. And then we also contemplate using some contractual services for some landscape work, janitorial services, the dock removal, some restroom facilities, porta potties and things like that would come up from time to time.
So the repair and maintenance number, how did you arrive at that number?
You know, I took a look at the, you know, the parks that we're contemplating have perhaps managing and taking care of, and, you know, looked at some of the deferred maintenance costs that we had there and tried to put together something that attempted to reduce that deferred maintenance piece. Not all at once, but over that sort of a 6-year period. It doesn't quite get to that 900,000, but it sort of keeps us within the budget and starts to work down some of that deferred maintenance. Although at the same time, there's other things growing. So that's sort of how I sort of took a look at it.
It struck me as low for that reason, for the fact that we've got so much deferred maintenance. Have we seen, weren't we supposed to see some kind of a more detailed budget come out of?
It was not provided.
What a shock.
I
I'm
know, so
shocked.
the city attorney
truly
was
am shocked.
correct.
Well, and so, I'm sorry for arriving late, everyone. So the I mean, I guess on a lot of things, they're based on what we've learned from NCPRD, like utilities.
And looking at our utility, what are we billing?
We bill them, I guess, so.
What are we billing them for?
Right.
And
Yeah.
since we, you know, and what do we get billed for?
Right.
So yeah, so that's sort of based on what we've seen. So, and I did mention earlier as we started, so this analysis here is a reflection of the city not being in the business of providing the comprehensive recreational services and adult services, as I mentioned in the staff report. So this is more of that small, we're taking care of Milwaukie Bay Park and the other neighborhood parks. And we've reached an arrangement with North Clackamas Park District to continue to provide those overarching recreational services and adult services. That being said, we're working on another analysis of how would we provide those services if we're not able to come to some sort of arrangement. And then, you know, I do have this transfer to our general fund from the Parks Fund, and that's for those, you know, those overhead costs, those integrated services, you know, our finance, our city manager, IT, fleet and facilities and all those sorts of things that we pay for. It's probably on a lower side there. But, you know, in discussions with Bonnie and the finance team, you know, she said that, you know, we have in the past made adjustments to those transfers to reflect, so it's not burdensome on that fund to start off as you're starting off those funds. And, you know, she used actually the building fund as an example. If there's, you know, decline in revenue from a building slowdown, we've made adjustments there. So, you know, that could be there's the potential to make some adjustments there as well. And then, you know, one of the things too that we're taking a look at is, you know, using some of the equipment that we have on hand that we're in the process of replacing, holding those off and not selling those as surplus. And, you know, basically that parks division, that parks department would purchase those reimburse those utilities for that equipment. And then, you know, we're also looking at perhaps purchasing a supplementary sort of zero-turn mower that we could use and not necessarily rely on the landscape contractor so we could be a little bit more proactive in some cases.
Do we not
As we start off.
expect negotiations to include NCPRD wanting us to buy equipment from them?
It doesn't right now,
Okay.
but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't be required under 222, we would have to divide assets. So we would have that discussion at that point.
Peter, how many staff does the city currently employ for taking care of the many properties that the city's already maintaining around town, like right around us right now, for example?
Well, so our facilities team, we have two, plus Damian, who serves as the supervisor. So Ed Moore and Mike Harmon. You know, they are our two facilities technicians, and they provide all of the facilities, you know, general services. And then as things get more complex or outside their skill set, you know, we contract out that work. So there's, you know, HVAC work that we contract out, electric work that we contract out, plumbing work, all those types of things that we end up having contracts for to do.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, in talking with the community, I'm hearing concerns about the service for parks maintenance that the city has provided in pre-1990 days. So nothing I can speak to, nothing anyone on the dais can speak to, but saying that the city did a bad job. So I'm looking for information that is a bit comparative to provide some context for how we're going to do the work that we're going to do and kind of demonstrate that we got this, folks. It's going to be okay. So that's why I'm asking the questions I'm asking, if you can.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think what we're looking at is we're going to have staff on hand to provide those basic services and supplemented by contractual services. So, you know, the mowing and the landscaping, that would be supplemented using our landscape contractor.
Right.
And, you know, we've got pricing from them that we feel pretty comfortable with on providing what we feel like is a good level of service. You know, one of the other things that I'd mentioned, there's some janitorial work that probably needs to be done, right? You know, there's an opportunity there as well. You know, our janitorial contract is getting up to close to $300,000 a year. And we don't necessarily have the best service all the time. You know, we're analyzing and looking at options there if we're providing park services and there's more janitorial work that we need to do and there's additional expense. Maybe it makes sense to bring that on board and we have staff to do that. So that would provide some additional flexibility and staff to provide services as well. You know, it's easy, it's certainly easier to dictate work and have the control of the work when you have the staff on hand than it is
Right.
contract work. So,
Right.
you know, we have had problems with some of our landscape contractors in the past. The one that we have now, I think, is doing a much, much better job, and they're much more proactive and responsive to when we do have issues.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll continue to hopefully have that relationship with this contractor and future contractors to do that. But, you know, it's by having the staff on hand and supplementing that with contractual services where we have those gaps. And, you know, there's probably gaps that we haven't figured out yet that we're missing, right? That
Sure, yeah.
we're going to learn as we go.
Yeah.
Right? So, and have to make adjustments.
I also just wanted to go back to the statement about having grass that was too long 30 years ago. So a couple of things. I think most of the council remembers when we had actually a member of our community show up with paint cans that were green. Said if you're not going to have them water the grass, then we should paint it. The grass at Milwaukie Bay Park has regularly been over 2 to 3 feet high, depending on the season at times, as a cost-saving measure for NCPRD. It's not me saying that they're wrong or right, but I do think that there is a maintenance process that whoever is in charge goes through in order to make decisions about where to best spend the dollars. And in that case, 3 years ago, it was to not water at the time and to let it go dormant.
I
So
thought that was for geese. I didn't think that was for NCPRD's budgetary.
it was actually for both. So at the time when Mitch was here, at the time that we were having discussions about it, and they were clear that they were also trying to reduce water usage. Because there's a cost in that. So I think it's easy to think that there's a one reason that a decision was made. I can't answer to the constituent who was at that site, but I can say that we ourselves will do the best work that staff do, and there will be a decision point where we may or may not choose a different path based on what's best for geese control, what's best for the health of our environment. There's all sorts of reasons why you would make different decisions. So I just wouldn't make an assertion about that being a sign of a good or a bad situation.
So yeah, I'm sorry, I did mention the equipment. So, you know, we're gonna be looking at using some of the equipment that we have on hand, and, you know, and then perhaps in the future years as we become more developed, you know, factoring in and projecting and forecasting new equipment purchases. You know, some of the other things we're also looking at as well right now that I wanted to mention. So I do have a contract in place to do this interim SDC methodology, working with the FCS group. And who've worked on our SDCs, most recently the wastewater SDC update methodology. So we are working with them to develop an interim SDC that we can use as we begin to manage parks and as we go through a larger master planning effort that identifies and engages with the community and identifies the community's desires. So
we really need to do that as opposed to just replicating what NCPRD's SDCs are?
Well, you know, we need to have our, I think we do. I think we need to have our own methodology put in place, that we've done an analysis, that we've used, you know, the available information. You know, we're going to be using documents that NCPRD's put together that identify, you know, capital improvements that are, you know, related to Milwaukie, and we'll use that with input also from staff on things that we've identified as perhaps future needs to develop this interim SDC that we can use to capture revenues from future growth as we're going through the master planning effort. And then I'm also in the process of getting a contract in place to do this recreation services analysis. So I've got a consultant, Ballard King and Associates, I think what they're called, and they have some experience working with Happy Valley and NCPRD, and are well aware and have some really good experience and expertise in recreational services and programming and adult services, understand the Milwaukie Center and how that's functioned. So we'll be working with them to do that recreation services programming and what a structure might look like for Milwaukie as we, contemplate managing parks and providing recreation services.
So you're going to hear from us a lot in the next 3 months. The SDC methodology will be here in December under this council, and then the recreation services will be out a few more months.
Busy, busy.
Yeah, I just want to thank Peter. I couldn't have done any of this without him. So I really appreciate how he stepped into the space, and his due diligence and knowledge and expertise is it's greatly appreciated. I know that this is new for him in many ways, but it's old for him in the sense that we've been doing land maintenance and management for a long time. So I appreciate how he's doing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, great report. Step forward. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. Well, with that, we are adjourned from the work session, and strangely, we have no executive session tonight.
We don't. Don't worry. I'll make that up for you in future weeks.
We never get out of the work session early. What happened?
And you get dinner.
So with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.